The Red Ball Express, the logistics revolution that broke the Wehrmacht. Part 1. The General's Delusion. August 19th, 1944. Wehrmacht High Command, East Prussia. Colonel General Alfred Jodl leaned over maps of the Western Front spread across a massive oak table. The retreat lines of German forces resembled bleeding wounds traced across French territory in red pencil by his adjutant. But within this chaos of defeat, Jodl's analytical mind caught a glimmer of hope, mathematically irrefutable, cold as a Prussian winter. The numbers were merciless and seemed to work in Germany's favor. American General Patton's Third Army had advanced 400 miles from the Normandy beaches in just 30 days. Incredible speed, unprecedented breakthrough, and completely unsustainable. Jodl's staff officers had performed calculations with German pedantry. Patton's supply lines stretched more than 400 miles. Each armored division consumed 150,000 gallons of fuel daily while advancing. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies every day. An armored division, 1,000 tons. Patton had 12 divisions advancing along a front 60 miles wide. The mathematics were inexorable. The Americans have outrun their own logistics, Jodl pronounced, straightening and looking at his officers. Patton will stop within days, possibly hours. No army can maintain such speed of advance without fuel. Physical laws cannot be violated, not even by American industry. From his position at Hitler's Wolf's Lair headquarters, Jodl analyzed what every German general understood from bitter experience. Mechanized warfare was, above all, a war of supply, and supply had its limits. The calculations seemed infallible. Patton's Third Army would stall, giving the Wehrmacht time to regroup on the Seine, perhaps hold out until winter. Maybe even throw the Americans back into the sea. What Jodl didn't know, 125 miles from his headquarters, 5,958 trucks were already rolling eastward in an endless column, headlights blazing, in open violation of all military doctrine, delivering 12,500 tons of cargo every 24 hours. The Red Ball Express, a logistics operation so audacious that German military science couldn't even imagine its possibility, was preparing to shatter all assumptions about mechanized warfare. Within 72 hours, Patton's supposedly immobilized tanks would break through German positions on the Seine. Within a week, they would liberate Paris. Within a month, they would reach the German border. The best military minds of the Wehrmacht were about to receive a lesson in American logistics that would forever change their understanding of modern war. A lesson taught by 23,000 truck drivers, 75% of whom were African Americans, who transformed one-way highways into the most efficient military supply line in history. Part 2. Confidence born in battle. The German General Staff's confidence in American logistical catastrophe stemmed from decades of military experience and recent observations. The Wehrmacht had pioneered blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined operations, and deeply understood, from their own skin, the tyranny of supply lines. Their own campaigns had repeatedly stalled when logistics couldn't keep pace with tactical successes. In Russia, the Wehrmacht's advance bogged down not so much from Soviet resistance as from the elementary inability to supply troops across vast distances. German trucks broke down on Russian roads with frightening regularity. Horse-drawn wagons, still 80% of German military transport, couldn't keep up with the speed of tank spearheads. Differences in railroad gauge meant supplies piled up hundreds of miles from the front, useless mountains of equipment. General of Panzer Troops, Heinrich von Luttwitz, who commanded the 47th Panzer Corps from September 1944, wrote in July, "The Americans face the same logistical impossibility we faced in Russia. Their mechanical advantage becomes a disadvantage. Machines need fuel, ammunition, spare parts. They've advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History teaches us what comes next. Paralysis." German intelligence meticulously tracked American consumption rates. One Sherman tank burned half a gallon per mile on roads, much more across terrain. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies per day. An armoured division, 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing on a front 60 miles wide. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. 12,000 tons daily, transported 400 miles from the beaches over damaged roads through a transportation network the Germans had systematically destroyed during retreat. Major General Siegfried Westphal, who became Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt in September, calculated on August 20th. Even if the Americans have unlimited trucks, which they don't, and ideal roads, which they lack, and no mechanical breakdowns, which is impossible, they still cannot sustain Patton's advance for more than 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be violated, not even by American industry. Part 3. Birth of the Impossible. August 25, 1944. 2 p.m. Requisitioned French chateau near Laval. Lieutenant Colonel Lauren Ayres of the Motor Transport Service stood before a room full of skeptical officers. The mathematics they presented were harsh. Patton's Third Army consumed supplies faster than any army in history, advancing at speeds that contradicted all logistical calculations. Traditional supply methods, rail transport, scheduled convoys, distribution through warehouses, had collapsed under the pressure. "Gentlemen," Ayres announced, "we will create a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front line. Every vehicle will operate 20 hours out of 24. No stops except for refueling and breakdowns. We will move a minimum of 12,500 tons daily." The name came from railroad terminology. Red Ball, in railroad jargon, meant urgent cargo with priority over everything else. The Red Ball Express would operate on the same principle. Absolute priority, no delays, no exceptions. The technical specifications defied German military doctrine. 2 parallel one-way highways, one for loaded trucks moving forward, another for empty ones returning. 24-hour operations with headlights blazing, abandoning camouflage. A no-stop policy, except for fuel and mechanical breakdowns. 5-minute intervals between convoys. Average speed 35 miles per hour. Mobile repair teams every 50 miles. Military police checkpoints removing any vehicle moving slower than 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding the Communications Zone Forward Section, studied the projected numbers. "We need 140 truck companies, minimum 5,958 vehicles operating at 90% availability. This is impossible by any logistics textbook ever written." Yet within 36 hours, the impossible became real. Part 4. The troops Hitler didn't expect. August 26, 1944. Drivers from the 3,916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, nicknamed Deuce and a Half, loaded with 105mm artillery shells, heading to Patton's guns in Mellon, 300 miles east. The demographic composition of the Red Ball Express would have shocked German racial theorists. Of the 23,000 drivers who ultimately operated the route, approximately 75% were African American soldiers serving in a still segregated army. These men, who couldn't eat in white restaurants or use white restrooms in much of America, kept the army of the most celebrated white general moving. The irony escaped no one. The drivers created their own culture within hours. They painted slogans on their trucks. Patton's Blood Bank. Hitler, we're coming. Detroit to Berlin Express. They created their own traffic rules. Slow vehicles immediately pulled over. Broken trucks were shoved into ditches. Any truck traveling slower than 20 miles per hour was considered a road hazard. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units began reporting something unprecedented. Elements of the 116th Reconnaissance Battalion radioed from positions overlooking the main Red Ball route. Continuous column of vehicles, headlights visible for 20 kilometers. No intervals, no camouflage. Estimate: 1,000 vehicles per hour. The Americans have abandoned all military precautions. This violated everything German military doctrine taught. Headlights at night attracted airstrikes. Continuous columns presented ideal targets for artillery. Lack of intervals between vehicles meant one disabled truck could stop an entire column. Yet the Americans seemed unconcerned. Lieutenant General Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express from concealed positions on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters reflected growing alarm. The enemy employs a supply system exceeding our understanding. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without interruption. They don't hide, don't disperse, follow no rules we comprehend. This isn't military science. This is mass production applied to war. Part 5. Numbers the Germans couldn't accept. The numbers achieved by the Red Ball Express defied German calculations of logistical possibility. First week, August 25th through 31st, 1944, 89,939 tons of supplies delivered average daily tonnage. 12,848 tons, round trip distance, 686 miles. Transport rotation, 5,958 trucks making 1.5 trips daily. Fuel consumed by the operation itself, 300,000 gallons. German logistics specialists, capturing these figures from American documents, dismissed them as propaganda. But the numbers were real, and they were growing. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express established a rhythm that seemed impossible to German logistics officers still relying on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of their transport. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from the Western Terminal average convoy. 67 vehicles cargo per vehicle, 5 tons standard, 7 tons with frequent overloading. Time to cover 350 miles one way. 14 hours average. Turnaround time at each end. 2 hours vehicles in constant motion. 5,000 at any given moment. The Red Ball Express spawned innovations hourly as drivers and mechanics solved problems German military science considered insurmountable. When trucks broke down, approximately 1,800 daily, mobile repair teams performed repairs right on the roadside. Mechanics developed a triage system. 15 minutes to repair, or push it off the road. Parts were ripped from vehicles deemed beyond repair. Engines were swapped in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When the designated Red Ball route became congested, drivers created alternative paths. They requisitioned French buses for personnel transport and freed trucks for cargo. They captured German vehicles, painted them olive drab, and put them to work. They built bypasses around destroyed bridges using rubble from bombed buildings as roadbed. The Germans, watching this chaos that somehow produced order, couldn't comprehend it. German logistics doctrine emphasized careful planning, maintenance schedules, and proper procedures. The Americans violated every principle, yet their system accelerated instead of collapsing. Part 6. Fuel as a weapon of war. The most staggering revelation for German observers was American fuel management. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just for its own operations, more than many German armies received for all purposes. Yet the fuel never ran out. The Americans created a parallel miracle. Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean, laying fuel pipelines across the English Channel. By September 1944, fuel flowed through underwater pipes whose existence German intelligence didn't even suspect. Forward fuel dumps were established every 25 miles along the Red Ball route. Tank trucks operated their own parallel convoy system, guaranteeing no vehicle waited longer than 10 minutes for refueling. Major General Walter Warlimont observed from aerial reconnaissance photographs, "The Americans have fuel depots larger than all our strategic reserves. They burn more gasoline transporting gasoline than we allocate to entire tank divisions. This isn't war as we understand it. This is industrial abundance." Part 7. Speed that shattered doctrine. The Red Ball Express didn't just supply Patton's advance, it multiplied its speed exponentially. German military doctrine calculated that an armoured division could sustain an advance of 20 to 30 miles per day under optimal conditions. Patton's divisions, supplied by the Red Ball, averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. September 1st, 1944. The 4th Armoured Division advanced 35 miles during morning operations, stopped for resupply at noon. Red Ball trucks were already waiting with fuel and ammunition. The division advanced another 32 miles in the afternoon. This 67-mile single-day advance shattered German defensive planning that assumed maximum 30-mile daily advances. Colonel General Heinz Guderian, reviewing reports in East Prussia, initially refused to believe them. No armoured force can advance 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical breakdowns alone prevent it. This is propaganda or mistaken identification. But intercepted American radio transmissions confirmed it. Even more alarming for German commanders was that the Americans openly broadcast their positions without encryption, absolutely confident in their ability to move faster than the Germans could react. Part 8. Reports that destroyed confidence. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence compiled comprehensive reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were catastrophic for Wehrmacht planning. Every assumption about American military capabilities required revision. The report contained observations that challenged German military science. The Americans wastefully expended vehicles, abandoning damaged trucks instead of repairing them. Drivers operated on stimulants for days, violating all personnel management principles. No camouflage discipline, making the entire system vulnerable to air attacks that never materialized, mechanical breakdown rates of 30% daily, simply overwhelmed by redundancy, fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European army. Field Marshal Walter Model's response revealed growing desperation. If these reports are accurate, we face not a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they don't fear us. They're wasteful with resources because they have infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics. Part 9. The price paid by invisible heroes. The drivers of the Red Ball Express paid a physical price German observers couldn't see. Drivers worked 72 hours straight, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents killed 300 drivers during the Red Ball's operational period. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, burned when overheated engines ignited. Yet morale remained extraordinarily high. These men, mostly African Americans, denied equal rights at home, understood they were making history. They proved Hitler's racial theories wrong with every mile driven, every ton delivered. Captured German officers gave eloquent testimony to the Red Ball Express's impact. First Lieutenant Hans von Luck, captured in September 1944, told his interrogators, "We understood we'd lost when we realized your supply system. You break all rules, waste fuel, abandon vehicles, exhaust drivers, yet succeed through sheer volume. You've industrialized war beyond our comprehension." The psychological impact on German troops was devastating. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear American trucks all night, every night. Endless motors, endless supplies. They had 3 bullets per rifle, while Americans hauled millions of rounds. The sound itself became psychological warfare. Part 10. Trucks that amazed engineers. The vehicles themselves astonished German engineers. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, backbone of the Red Ball Express, represented mass production perfection. General Motors produced over 500,000 of these vehicles by war's end, more trucks than the entire German army possessed of all types combined. The trucks had innovations the Germans hadn't implemented. 4-wheel drive as standard, not exception automatic tyre inflation systems, waterproofing, allowing 30-inch Ford's engines running on low-quality fuel without modification. Heaters that actually worked in winter. Even more stunning was the American maintenance philosophy. Where Germans rebuilt engines, Americans replaced them entirely. Where Germans rationed parts, Americans discarded whole vehicles for minor problems. Where Germans had master mechanics, Americans had thousands of competent mechanics capable of 80% of repairs. Part 11. Adaptation at light speed. As the front moved eastward, the Red Ball Express adapted at speeds that stunned German planning officers accustomed to weeks of preparation for major logistics changes. When the original route to Chartres became insufficient, the Americans created Red Ball extensions overnight. White Ball Express, Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond, Cherbourg to railroad transfer points, Red Lion, Bayeux to Brussels, ABC, Antwerp, Brussels, Charleroi. Each new route was operational within 48 hours of conception. German staff officers required weeks to plan similar operations. The Americans simply painted new signs, assigned trucks, and started rolling. Part 12. The Racial Paradox. The predominance of African American drivers in the Red Ball Express created cognitive dissonance for German racial theorists. Nazi ideology declared blacks inferior, incapable of technical tasks, lacking initiative. Yet these drivers performed logistical miracles German forces couldn't match. African American soldiers understood the irony. They knew what the Nazis thought of them, and it made them drive harder. Every mile driven proved Hitler wrong. They fought racism with truck keys, defeating Nazi ideology through superior performance. Part 3. Infrastructure from nothing. The Red Ball Express required infrastructure the Germans considered impossible to create under combat conditions. American engineers built or reinforced 40 bridges, 15 major fuel depots, 26 repair stations, 8 temporary camps for drivers, all while the operation continued running. The bridge at Montaut was destroyed by German engineers specifically to stop American logistics. The Wehrmacht calculated replacement would require minimum 6 weeks. American engineers built a temporary bridge in 14 hours, while Red Ball convoys detoured just 8 miles on hastily bulldozed roads. German engineers watched American construction methods with astonishment. No planning meetings, no detailed blueprints, just immediate action. They built faster than Germans could destroy, creating infrastructure that appeared overnight in French fields. Part 13. Artillery superiority through logistics. 1. Red Ball Express achievement particularly shocked German artillery officers. Ammunition delivery rates exceeding their highest theoretical calculations. American artillery units fired without restriction, a luxury no German unit had enjoyed since 1942. During the siege of Metz fortifications in September 1944, 20th Corps artillery fired 100,000 shells in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every shell plus 20% reserve. German artillery defending Metz was rationed 50 shells per gun per day. The disproportion was overwhelming. American guns fired continuously for hours, while German artillery officers calculated such bombardments required 50 ammunition trucks per hour. The Red Ball provided it without pause. Part 14. Eating themselves. The Red Ball Express consumed vehicles at rates that would paralyze any other army. By late September, mechanical attrition reached staggering proportions. Average vehicle lifespan, 10,000 miles, norm 30,000. Daily non-operational rate, 30% of all vehicles' engines replaced weekly. 500 tires consumed weekly. 10,000 total vehicles destroyed or abandoned. Over 5,000, yet the operation never slowed. American production anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports bringing hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers trained for 2 days and were thrown into convoys. German calculations showed Americans destroyed more trucks weekly than the Wehrmacht had in France. Yet their transport capacity increased rather than decreased. They achieved what Germans considered impossible: logistics faster than consumption. Propaganda of abundance French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed American abundance that contradicted years of German occupation scarcity. The psychological impact on the occupied population was immediate and profound. Red Ball Express drivers, especially African Americans, often shared their rations with French civilians despite regulations. Children gathered at every stop, and drivers gave them chocolate, cigarettes, soap. The contrast with German occupation was stark. Americans casually gave away what Germans strictly rationed. German intelligence reported the propaganda effect. French civilians now believe American victory is inevitable. They cite the truck columns as proof. Resistance activity has increased 400% along Red Ball routes. The population that accepted our occupation now actively opposes it. Crisis that became triumph. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its greatest challenge. Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the Red Ball struggled to maintain supply pace. The round trip now exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing from exhaustion, vehicles falling apart. German intelligence detected the strain. General of Panzer Troops Hasso von Manteuffel reported September 8th. American supply lines show signs of collapse. Intervals between convoys have increased from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speeds have decreased. This is our opportunity. But American adaptability again surprised the Germans. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized, created intermediate transfer points, reducing individual trips to 350 miles, implemented driver rotation systems, established forward repair bases, doubled the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, delivery tonnage actually increased. The crisis that should have stopped Patton only made the system stronger. Airlift as supplement. In addition to the Red Ball Express, the Americans implemented another logistic solution. The Germans considered impossible: large-scale air supply. C-47 transport aircraft began delivering critical supplies directly to forward units. Each aircraft carried 3 tons. September 16, 1944. Wehrmacht observers counted 900 transport flights in one day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe at its peak managed to deliver 300 tons daily to Stalingrad and considered it maximum effort. The Americans used transport aircraft like trucks, unconcerned about fighter escort, without fuel limitations. They assumed losses and overwhelmed them with numbers. The Wehrmacht couldn't compete with this industrial arithmetic. Decentralization as weapon. The Red Ball Express operated on command principles that violated German military hierarchy. Junior officers made decisions reserved for generals in the Wehrmacht. Sergeants commanded operations of greater scale than German colonels managed. This decentralization puzzled German observers. American logistics operated without visible centralized control. Every lieutenant acted as a general, every sergeant as a colonel. Chaos should have resulted. Instead, they achieved efficiency the Wehrmacht couldn't reach with rigid hierarchy. Transition to rail. By October 1944, advancing railheads began reducing Red Ball Express requirements. The operation that was supposed to last 10 days continued 82 days, delivering 412,000 tons of supplies across 122 million ton miles. German commanders, now fighting on their own borders, reflected on what they'd witnessed. Field Marshal Model wrote in his final report, "We were defeated not primarily by American tanks or aircraft. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved that in modern war, logistics is strategy. The transition to rail itself was miraculous. American railroad engineers restored 1,000 miles of destroyed French rail lines while the Red Ball operating. They laid new track faster than Germans destroyed it, often using captured German railroad equipment. Final statistics of the impossible. The final Red Ball. Express statistics defied every German calculation of logistical possibility. 82 days of operation, 412,193 tons of supplies delivered, 122 million ton miles, 5,958 vehicles average, peak 7,000. 23,000 drivers employed total, 700,000 gallons of fuel consumed daily. 40,000 tons of ammunition delivered to Patton alone, 15 million rations transported, 135,000 tons of medical supplies. Studying these figures in captivity, German officers acknowledged they'd calculated American logistics based on European precedents. They multiplied their best performance by 3 and assumed that was the American maximum. They were wrong by a factor of 10. Destruction of faith beyond tonnage and distance, the Red Ball Express achieved something deeper. It destroyed German faith in their own military superiority. Wehrmacht officers who dismissed Americans as soft and mechanically dependent watched those same Americans achieve logistical miracles through determination and industrial abundance. German prisoners stood silently at POW camp fences, counting Red Ball trucks passing by. Some wept. They understood what it meant. Not just that Americans could supply their armies, but that they could waste more than Germans could produce. They watched their worldview crumble, one truck at a time. Racial reckoning within America. The Red Ball Express forced an unexpected racial reckoning within the American Army itself. The operation's success depended overwhelmingly on African American soldiers who were still segregated, denied equal treatment, and barred from combat roles. General Eisenhower, visiting Red Ball operations in September 1944, personally witnessed the contradiction. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, recorded, "The general stood watching colored drivers who'd been at the wheel 20 hours straight. He said, 'These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to rethink many things.'" The success created pressure for integration that contributed to military desegregation 3 years later. African American soldiers proved in France what they'd always known. Given tools and opportunity, they'd match anyone. The Red Ball was their battle, and they won it decisively. Racial theorists in silence. German racial theorists struggled to explain the contradiction. SS publications on racial science simply stopped mentioning American logistics operations. The evidence was too overwhelming to deny, too devastating to acknowledge. German military engineers intensely studied Red Ball Express operations after the war. The lessons revolutionized logistics thinking worldwide. Volume overcomes inefficiency. Mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability. Decentralized execution enables speed. Standardization multiplies capability. Human endurance has limits, but they're higher than assumed. General Franz Halder, former chief of the German General Staff, wrote in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved that logistics determines strategy, not vice versa. The Americans understood this. We learned it too late." Stories of individual heroism. Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers emerged individual stories of heroism that Germans found incomprehensible within their military structure. These were verified accounts from military archives. Corporal John L. Houston drove continuously for 48 hours, delivering ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division at Cambrai. Fell asleep at the wheel 3 times, but continued after other drivers revived him. Private Booker T. Washington, his truck caught fire from overheated brakes while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning it as procedure required, he drove the burning vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, jumping out when flames reached the cab. The supplies saved wounded soldiers of both armies. These stories, multiplied thousands of times, revealed to Germans the American military culture. Individual initiative, calculated risk, and mission accomplishment over regulatory compliance. German attempt to copy, and failure desperately, German forces attempted to create their own Red Ball Express version in late 1944. Operation Greif during the Battle of the Bulge included plans for captured American trucks to create German supply lines. The effort immediately failed. German drivers couldn't maintain American speeds. German mechanics couldn't repair American equipment fast enough. German fuel stocks couldn't support consumption rates. Most importantly, Germans couldn't reproduce the American attitude of unlimited resources. The lieutenant commanding the operation reported, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within a week, 30 were non-operational. Americans would have replaced them. We tried to repair them. This difference explains our defeat. Winter test. Winter 1944-45 provided the Red Ball Express its ultimate test. Freezing rain, snow, and frost should have stopped wheeled transport. German doctrine stated wheeled logistics became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius. Yet the Red Ball Express continued operating. Drivers wrapped chains on tires, poured alcohol in radiators, and kept rolling. Speeds dropped from 35 to 15 miles per hour, but tonnage delivery continued. German observers reported ice-covered convoys moving through blizzards that stopped tank divisions. The Americans created a logistics system that functioned regardless of weather, terrain, or enemy action. It wasn't elegant or efficient by German standards, but it was unstoppable. Lesson in captivity. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were tasked with studying Red Ball Express operations for historical records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German military pride. Infantry General Friedrich Schulz summarized, "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined. The Americans created a temporary civilization, thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies that existed only to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They created superior temporary systems in days." The most penetrating analysis came from General Heinz Guderian, father of German armored warfare. "We invented blitzkrieg, but never solved its fundamental limitation, logistics. The Americans solved it through industrial abundance we considered impossible. The Red Ball Express wasn't a supply line, but a flowing river of material that drowned our forces." Cost that paid for itself. The Red Ball Express cost the United States approximately $100 million in 1944 dollars. Destroyed vehicles, consumed fuel, damaged roads, French claims for compensation. German staff officers, accustomed to managing scarcity, found this figure incomprehensible. Yet the Americans considered it cheap. The operation secured capture of 400,000 German soldiers, liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg War shortened by approximately 6 months. Each day of war cost America $250 million. The Red Ball Express paid for itself in 1 day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, commanding European theatre logistics, stated, "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. In any previous war, these would be catastrophic losses. In American industrial warfare, these are acceptable overhead." Post-war legacy. An unexpected consequence of the Red Ball Express was its revolutionary influence on post-war civilian logistics. Thousands of drivers returned to America with experience managing the world's largest transportation network. These veterans founded trucking companies, designed interstate highways, and created the modern American logistics industry. Companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were founded by Red Ball veterans who applied military logistics to civilian commerce. They learned in France that volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection. If you can keep trucks moving 24 hours, you can move the world historians' recognition. Military historians unanimously recognize the Red Ball Express as the decisive logistics operation of the European theatre. Without it, Patton's advance stops. Paris is liberated weeks later. German forces establish winter defensive lines. The operation validated American military doctrine, emphasizing logistics over tactics. While German officers studied Clausewitz and battlefield maneuver, Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railroad schedules. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that, in modern war, the ability to supply forces determines victory more than tactical brilliance. Von Rundstedt's Moment of Realization, September 15, 1944. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Supreme German Commander in the West, received comprehensive intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After studying reports for hours, He convened his staff. "Gentlemen," he announced, "we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that makes distance irrelevant. Our strategy assumed their culminating point where advancing forces outrun supplies. This point doesn't exist. They've revolutionized warfare, and we're fighting the last war." His operations officer, First Lieutenant Hans Speidel, suggested intercepting Red Ball routes with remaining Luftwaffe forces. Von Rundstedt's response revealed complete understanding. With what? They have 6,000 trucks. If we destroy 1,000, which we can't, they'll replace them in a week. We'd need to destroy 200 trucks daily just to match their production. We don't have 200 aircraft total. Human stories behind statistics. Behind the statistics stood human stories that revealed American character to German observers. Drivers who hadn't slept for 3 days refused relief because their trucks might not get through. Mechanics worked in freezing rain to keep convoys rolling. Teenagers lied about their age to drive trucks. Such stories, multiplied throughout the operation, created mythology that demoralized German forces. Americans weren't soft as propaganda claimed. They drove themselves harder than Germans drove horses, but did so voluntarily, not from fear. This made them more dangerous than German doctrine understood. Psychological warfare by sound. The Red Ball Express became unintentional propaganda more powerful than any planned operation. German soldiers could hear the convoys at night, endless streams of motors that never stopped. The sound itself became psychological warfare. German units reported rumors of phantom convoys that demoralized troops as effectively as real logistics. Knowledge that Americans had unlimited supplies while Germans rationed last ammunition created despair that undermined combat effectiveness. American psychological warfare units recognized the impact. They began broadcasting truck engine sounds toward German lines when actual convoys weren't present. German units reported these phantom convoys as real, demonstrating the psychological damage the Red Ball Express inflicted. Speed of dissolution. In November 1944, with rail lines partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially discontinued. But its methods forever revolutionized military logistics. The concept of continuous, high-volume, wasteful, but effective supply became American military doctrine. The final innovation was dissolution speed. The massive operation, 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, hundreds of installations, disappeared in 72 hours. Troops reassigned, vehicles redistributed, routes returned to civilian use. Germans required months to create smaller operations and years to dissolve them. Americans built what they needed, used it, discarded it, and built something better. Testimony at surrender. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many specifically mentioned the Red Ball Express as demonstrating the hopelessness of continued resistance. General of Panzer Troops, Hasso von Manteuffel stated at interrogation, "When we understood your logistics capabilities, we realized the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them. The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense." Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, one of Germany's most competent commanders, when asked what most surprised him about American forces, answered, "Not your tanks, not your aircraft, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express showed us you'd militarized the production capacity of your entire society. We fought against your factories, not just your soldiers." Numbers that tell the story. The final Red Ball Express statistics stand as testimony to American industrial warfare. Total cargo delivered, 412,193 tons. Total distance traveled, 122 million ton-miles trucks employed. 5,958 daily average, 7,000 at peak drivers participated. 23,000 total operational days. 82 fuel consumed. 57 million gallons. Tires worn. 180,000 vehicles destroyed. Over 5,000 cost. $100 million. German divisions defeated through supply advantage. 47 estimated war days shortened, 180. These numbers tell a story that transcended military operations. They represent the moment when war changed forever, when industrial capacity became more important than tactical brilliance, when logistics determined strategy instead of serving it. Memory through 50 years. In 1994, for the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Retry M Continue Red Ball Express at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. The ceremony recognized an operation that had been overshadowed by combat operations but proved equally decisive for Allied victory. Veterans who attended spoke of their pride in an operation that proved American industrial might and individual determination could overcome any obstacle. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical breakdowns, through weather that stopped armor. They were mostly black soldiers, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition during the war, but they delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. Lesson for the ages. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics isn't support, it's the main effort. The operation demonstrated that industrial democracy could mobilize resources on a scale totalitarian efficiency couldn't match. German generals who'd laughed at American logistics were silenced by 6,000 trucks delivering 12,500 tons daily across 700 miles of liberated France. They assumed Americans would follow European precedent, conserve resources, advance cautiously. Instead, Americans created a logistical tsunami that drowned German forces in Allied abundance. Characteristics of victory. The operation's success came not from military genius, but from American characteristics the Germans never understood: industrial abundance, mechanical aptitude, improvisational skills, initiative from individual soldiers who made independent decisions that would have required field marshal approval in the Wehrmacht. In his memoirs, General George S. Patton, whose Third Army was the primary beneficiary of the Red Ball Express, wrote the definitive tribute. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserve as much credit for defeating Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical breakdown, through weather that stopped armor. Without them, Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition. But they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. Truth that stands as monument. This truth stands as the definitive testimony of the Red Ball Express. 23,000 mostly African-American drivers operating 6,000 trucks on a one-way highway to victory achieved what German military science declared impossible. They supplied advancing armies faster than physics allowed, maintained pace beyond human endurance, and proved that in modern war, the side with the most trucks beats the side with the best tactics. German generals laughed at American logistics, dismissing it as wasteful, undisciplined, impossible to sustain. 82 days later, those same generals surrendered to armies supplied by the Red Ball Express, finally understanding that American trucks defeated German tanks, that industrial abundance overwhelmed military perfection, that logistics became strategy. Ending that became beginning. The Red Ball Express ended November 16, 1944, but its influence echoed through military history. It proved that in the industrial age, victory belongs not to the bravest soldiers or most brilliant generals, but to the nation that can deliver more supplies, faster, farther. German generals who laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized war at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves its place among history's great military operations. Not because it was elegant or efficient, it was neither, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton moving, kept Germans retreating, and proved that in modern war, a column of trucks matters more than a column of tanks. Scars on French roads. France's highways still bear the Red Ball Express's scars. Ruts pounded by overloaded trucks, hastily repaired bridges, roadsides littered with abandoned vehicles. But the operation's greatest monument is the speed of Allied victory. Every day the war shortened saved thousands of lives. The Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, the German generals who laughed at American logistics learned modern warfare's hardest lesson. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America talking very loudly, in the roar of 6,000 engines that never stopped, carrying democracy and destruction at 35 miles per hour, down a one-way road to victory. Epilogue: the last word. The last word belongs to a German officer whose name is lost to history, quoted by a Red Ball driver at the 1994 commemoration event. Standing by a Belgian road, watching an endless column of American trucks, the officer said in accented English to his captors, "We prepared for everything. For your tanks, your aircraft, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rolled past him at 5-minute intervals, driven by exhausted Americans who rewrote the rules of war, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express transformed logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. German generals stopped laughing when they understood this truth, but by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history.